or not we should set up a chair for a straw man for these hearings, because these are all ridiculous straw man arguments. First of all, the President of the United States has said he would abide by court orders, and this administration has abided by every single court order. So this contraption that Democrats continue to try to create some faux constitutional crisis that doesn't exist, or as it was during the campaign, some threat to democracy to scare people, they ought to be ashamed of themselves, because it hasn't happened. It hasn't happened. And I want to give Mr. Woodward, you an opportunity to respond when the senator from California didn't give you the chance to respond with your answer before I go into my questions with a limited amount of time.
Thank you, Senator. I will be brief, and I will reiterate that I don't believe I would ever be asked to advise my client to defy a court order. It's not happening. And so the answer, it depends, matters, because there is litigation all across this country right now. And so we have to look at each and every case very carefully. We advise the client, and then the client acts. That is the role of the Department of Justice.
I want to, Mr. Edlow, I do want to ask, I've been raising the alarm on this temporary protected status, or TPS, for quite some time now, and the Supreme Court has just weighed in and ruled essentially that Joe Biden had really been abusing his authority, especially at the end, just sort of waving a magic wand and really abusing this process. And so there are 350,000 Venezuelans now that will not receive this temporary protected status because they shouldn't have got it in the first place. I want to ask, how will the USCIS stop automatic renewals and kick out folks whose countries do not qualify anymore?
Well, thank you for the question, Senator. As I stated earlier, the decision on whether to continue any TPS program rests with the Secretary, and USCIS would act accordingly. So depending on the country, depending on when the
well, let's use these Venezuelans.
Senator, I would hesitate to comment on anything that's under active litigation at this point.
Okay, let's say there's another, because, I mean, let's say Haitians, which also fell into that. I want to know what tools, and I'm not asking you to opine on it, I want to know what tools are going to be used to enforce a lawful court order.
I understand.
To kick people out of here.
So certainly, Senator, the employment authorization cards, which are essentially the evidence of the status, are going to set to expire. The systems at USCIS, when appropriate, are turned off so that renewals are either kicked out or rejected, and then at that point, it becomes the responsibility of our sister agency, ICE, to work on the next step, which would be the apprehension and removal of any individual that remained after that period of time.
So USCIS decides who qualifies for TPS.
Well, after a TPS designation is made, USCIS would determine eligibility based on the law.
So they need to prove they've been here since the designation date and meet other rules. But the Biden administration made it with a rubber stamp, right? It totally, completely obliterated the process that was put in place. Is that your understanding?
Senator, my understanding is everything the Biden administration did with regard to USCIS was with a rubber stamp. So yes, TPS. The way in which parole was utilized, the way in which anything was utilized was a rubber stamp, while not caring about the long lines of people within the backlog that just kept growing because they weren't taking that seriously. They were reassigning resources to just handle the unlawful border activity.
Right. So what could be introduced as far as new vetting rules to make sure this isn't just being handed out like candy? What could be done?
Well, certainly, if confirmed, I'm happy to work with Congress to figure out if there are additional authorities that we need in order to move in that direction. But I really do think that once confirmed, we can take a look at things internally, turn some processes on, act both regulatorily and sub-regulatorily to take a real bite out of some of this, and to actually, for the first time, feel confident in the vetting that's being done by the agency.
Thank you. Mr. Squires, I do want to ask you, switching gears, China's been ripping us off for a very long time as it relates to our IP, and I know there's a lot of concern with some of the breakthroughs they've gotten from DeepSeek. I mean, there's no IP acknowledged, really, if it's not being ripped off. It just isn't part of what they're and how they handle these things. What concerns do you have, or what can be done to combat Chinese IP theft? But then as we get into these large language models moving forward, how do you view generally accepted IP laws to be, how does it work into large language models moving forward? Because you've heard some people talk about just abandoning IP altogether.
Thank you, Senator. It's quite a complicated question.
Mr. Squires, I know that it is. Could you submit that for the record? Because I'm very interested in the detailed response.
I would be happy to, Senator.
On behalf of the chair, Senator Lee.